Here's how to fix a weird bug with the 40Hz beta update. The Steam Deck's been the top seller on Steam for a month straight now, so we did some math to try and figure out how many units have been sold. And let's check out the top 20 games on the Steam Deck for the month because they're actually kind of interesting. How's it going, everyone, and welcome to Deck Ready. This is the weekly news video where I take all of the biggest and best news stories all about the Steam Deck, round them up, and give you my thoughts on them. This week, I am not joined, sadly, by my Steam Deck because the left bumper broke and I had to send it back into Valve to get it RMA'd. And I gotta say, Valve has been really great with the customer service. I'm doing a video all about it in the coming weeks when I get my Steam Deck back. So if you wanna catch that as soon as I upload it, make sure you're subscribed with your notifications set to all. All right, so Valve's been doing this thing the past few months on the Steam store where they show the top selling games for different categories. They did recently update it though to include the top selling verified games for the Steam Deck. And the list is pretty interesting because it's a lot of games that I've never really seen people talking about, whether I'm on the subreddit, in the comments of my videos, or even on my Deck Ready Twitter, which is Stay Deck Ready if you want to follow it. And these are in no particular order of how much they've sold, but the top played games that are verified for Steam Deck this month are Aperture Desk Job, then we've got a game called Anno Mutationum, The Planet Crafter, Shadow Warrior 3, Have a Nice Death, Core Keeper, Tunic, Death Stranding, Director's Cut. Honestly, out of that entire list, the only game that I've played from start to finish on my Steam Deck is Tunic. I thought it was an excellent experience from top to bottom. I'm just surprised that that's a top selling game for the device considering it's available for free, quote unquote free, with an Xbox Game Pass subscription. So if you have a regular gaming PC or an Xbox Series X or S, you could just download the game with your subscription there, but people with Steam Decks are kind of avoiding that and buying it for full price on Steam. And once again, I played that game start to finish on the Steam Deck. I didn't touch it on my regular gaming PC, and I thought it was an awesome experience. It runs maxed out 60 frames per second at 800p, and the last boss kicked my ass. That was a really good gaming experience top to bottom. I do really want to try out Death Stranding Director's Cut. That makes sense it's on the list because we've seen that featured heavily on the Steam Deck before, but then there are these weird games that show up like Shadow Warrior 3. A, didn't know that was verified for the Steam Deck, and B, I have not seen anyone talking about that game, but it's one of the top played verified games on the device, which is pretty cool. That's a pretty hardcore first-person shooter. I mean, this one emulates Doom 2016 quite a lot, and Doom Eternal, and you need to be quick reaction time master to get these games beat at higher difficulties. And the third game that really stood out to me was Weird West. This is a game that kind of shadow dropped. It's also on Game Pass, so again, to see it this high on the Steam Deck's most played list is really interesting. It's basically like an immersive sim played from a top-down perspective. It's semi-open world. It looks really cool. It got pretty solid reviews, but it came out around the same time as Elden Ring, so it flew under people's radars. This is just another one that I haven't seen a lot of people talking about in all the usual places I look for the Steam Deck. So it's cool that so many different games from so many different genres are making their way up the Steam Deck's most played list. But if you just got your order email and you just got your hands on a device and you're looking for some new games to play that are either listed as playable or verified, Humble Bundle of all websites has you covered with a new bundle that features games that are great on the Steam Deck. You've got Ex Anima, which is verified, Mech Warrior 5 Mercenaries, which is playable. I'm assuming that's playable because of the text being small. Mutant Year Zero Road to Eden, which is listed as playable. That's like a linear story-based XCOM style game. Again, one that I could see being perfect on a handheld device. Neon Abyss, which is a really cool roguelite. This is one that I'm buying the bundle for. I think this game looks awesome and I've been meaning to play it. I just never picked it up. Orcs Must Die 2 and 3. I used to play Orcs Must Die all the time. These are both listed as playable, but 3 is listed as verified, which is cool. Paint the Town Red, which I've never heard of, is verified, and Parkasaurus is playable. Now the catch is with Humble Bundles that you have to pay a certain amount to get all 8 of the games I listed, but this time it's pretty cheap at $20, and in my opinion there's more than enough value here to make up for that $20 purchase. I'm actually excited to try out Mech Warrior 5 on the Steam Deck because having a great mech game sounds awesome, and again, a side scroller like Neon Abyss sounds like the perfect handheld game. I originally found out about this bundle from my favorite website, GamingOnLinux, so I will have it linked down in the description if you want to check it out for yourself. And speaking of Gaming on Linux, I was browsing through the website a couple days ago and I saw an article that said that the Steam Deck has been listed as the #1 top seller on Steam for about a month now, 4 weeks in a row straight, which is awesome and kind of makes sense because the Steam top sellers list is not listed by copies sold, it's listed by total total revenue. So obviously the Steam Deck caps out at around $600, so they need to sell way less Steam Decks to get that high on the list than you need to sell a game like Elden Ring. But the fact that it's so high on the list not only lets us know that this thing is making a lot of money, it also lets us know that Valve is shipping quite a bit of these things. Because the second place game on the list for a really long time now has been Elden Ring. And that got me thinking, can we use some simple math and some external websites to kind of pinpoint at least a guess of how many Steam Decks have been shipped by Valve to people at this point? And the reason for this is because Elden Ring is really high on the list, and you can use a website like Steam Charts to see how many concurrent players that game ever capped out at. So that's not even like the total number of sales. That's just like the maximum number of people playing Elden Ring at the same time. So I went over to Steam Charts, I typed in Elden Ring, and I found that around 925,000 people were playing Elden Ring at its peak concurrent point. So I took 925,000 and I multiplied it by $59.99, which is what the game retails for. And the number I got is about $55 million, give or take about 500 grand, but I want to use even numbers here, so we're going to say $55 million. And then after that, I decided to take that number and then divide it by the cost of the Steam Deck. Now, this is where we run into an issue, other than the fact that this only tells us how many people were concurrently playing Elden Ring. The second issue is that there are 3 different Steam Deck SKUs. So basically, I decided to take the $649 price, which is the highest price of the Steam Deck, because that'll get us the lowest number, which will probably bring us into the actual range of the device's sales. So when you divide $55,490,000 by $649, you get 85,502 Steam Decks that have potentially been sold. Now, this could be high because there are cheaper Steam Decks, and most people are probably going with the cheapest one, which is the 64 gigabyte one. And it could be also a little bit high because the Steam Deck has only been in the #1 slot for about a month now, which lines up pretty well with when Valve started doing 2 emails a week for people to buy their Steam Decks. But even if that is the case, and we're dealing with a number of Steam Decks sold that's around 80,000, maybe even as low as 75,000 out there, that is still extremely good, and it shows how in demand this device is. People were worried about when this thing was announced that it wasn't going to sell enough, like once Valve got through that initial pre-order phase, that people weren't going to be interested in this thing, and I think it's fair to say that that's not the case, because if it turned out to be an extremely niche device, that just gives Valve more incentive to kind of move on to the next thing, whatever that may be, instead of continuing to support this device as much as they have since it released. But it seems to at least be meeting their expectations or even exceeding them, because even since this thing has been released, we've gotten some really good software updates that added things in like refresh rate switching. They fixed a lot of the UI issues that people were complaining about. They added the keyboard to the desktop mode. They've added so many features since this thing came out, and on top of that, they even went back to the drawing board a little bit on the official dock and improved what's going to be included in terms of ports. So like, if this thing wasn't doing better or as well as they want it to, why would they continue to tinker with the dock and make it even better than it already was when people were generally satisfied with what they thought they were going to get? Now, as for when that dock is coming out, it still unfortunately just says late spring on the Steam Deck's website. I was kind of hoping they would nail down a release date or at least delay it so we know what's going on with this thing, because I really want this dock. We've talked about here on the channel a few stands that allow you to attach a USB-C hub to them, and that's really good. It's just going to feel a little bit better to me to have that drop-in support of the Steam Deck's native dock. And honestly, I'm just going to leave that thing set up at my desk because it connects with the USB-C cord. So if I leave my keyboard, my mouse, and my monitor plugged into the dock, I can connect that USB-C cord to the Thunderbolt port on my gaming laptop, and it'll work just like it does now. Right now, I'm using a DisplayPort to USB-C, and it works really well, but having it all be a one cable solution sounds great. Interestingly, I was talking to another Steam Deck YouTuber, FanTheDeck, who is awesome. You should definitely check out his channel, and we were trying to nail down how many Steam Decks have been sold. I talked through my math with him, and I gave him my guesstimate of around 80,000, and he said he's pretty sure they've sold about 75,000, but he's going to talk about it in a future video. So I'm really curious to hear how he got to that number, because even if it is 75,000 Steam Decks sold, that seems like a really good amount of this device when you take into consideration the really weird pre-order system and the fact that everything is just really hard to get, especially if it uses a chip right now. So hopefully as time goes on, Valve is able to keep ramping up order fulfillment and we get 3 emails a week, maybe even 4. It would be cool if we were getting them every single day, because I know my friend Dustin over at Sacred Symbols, the PlayStation podcast, he's been waiting so long to get his email and it just won't come through. And the last story I have for you guys today is about the beta update that has the 40 Hz refresh rate switching. So a lot of people have been updating their Steam Deck to this beta firmware because it works really well, and having that 40 hertz mode, especially for a game like Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga or Control, is so much better than playing at 30 frames per second at 60 hertz. But there was a story going around the past week or so that using the built-in frame and screen hertz limiter that comes along with this update causes more input latency depending on the game. So with certain games like Rogue Legacy 2, if you set the screen to 40 hertz and lock the frame rate of the game at 40 FPS, you would have more input latency than you should have running at that frame rate. Either way, it's good that Valve is aware of this, and I'm sure that when this update actually leaves the beta channel and comes into the stable channel, it won't have this issue anymore. But if you like having your screen set at 40 hertz, the easiest way to get around this is by limiting the frame rate in your actual game instead of using the frame rate limiter on your Steam Deck. So instead of hitting the 3 dots button and limiting the frame rate along with your refresh rate there, you would just do it in the game that you're playing. So Rogue Legacy 2 has an option to limit the frame rate at 40 FPS in the actual game menu, and that's awesome. Unfortunately, that's a feature that's not included in every game, but more and more recent games that I've played on the device have had some ability to set the actual frame rate of the game. One of those great examples being Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, and that is a game that looks so much better running at 40. And also, when I play that game on my main gaming PC at 60 hertz and 60 frames per second, it is almost indistinguishable from 40. I almost feel bad admitting that, but it feels about that good on my Steam Deck, which is great. And man, it's just making me want that thing back so much more. I really hope my RMA doesn't take too long. But until then, I'll be sticking with these Steam Deck news videos. So if you want to get the latest and greatest news about your brand new handheld, make sure you're subscribed with your notifications set to all.